Welcome, dear listener. Find a comfortable position, one where your body can fully rest. Take a slow, deep breath in and release it gently. Tonight, we journey together through the timeless wisdom of Zen Buddhism, through stories that have been shared for centuries to illuminate the path of understanding. There is no need to concentrate intensely on every word. Simply let these stories wash over you like gentle waves upon a shore. If you drift into sleep, that is perfectly natural. If you remain awake, allow yourself to rest in the spaciousness of these teachings. Let us begin. Part 1. The Nature of Mind. The Story of the Empty Cup. A learned professor once visited a renowned Zen master seeking to understand the depths of Zen philosophy. The master welcomed him warmly and began preparing tea. As they sat together, the professor spoke at length about his extensive studies, his theories, his interpretations of various Buddhist texts. The Zen master listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and began to pour tea into the professor's cup. He poured, and he continued to pour, even as the tea reached the brim of the cup. Still he poured. The tea spilled over the edges, flowing onto the saucer, then onto the table. Finally, the professor could contain himself no longer. "Master, please, the cup is full. No more will go in." The Zen master smiled gently and set down the teapot. "Like this cup," he said, "you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" This simple story reminds us of a profound truth. To receive new understanding, we must first create space. Our minds, like cups, can only hold so much. When we approach life, each moment, each teaching with a mind already full of preconceptions, judgments, and fixed ideas, we leave no room for genuine insight to enter. The practice of emptying the cup is not about forgetting what we know. Rather, it is about holding our knowledge lightly, being willing to see with fresh eyes, to question what we think we understand. It is the cultivation of what Zen calls beginner's mind, the mind that is open, eager, and free from the weight of expertise. Consider for a moment, what fills your cup? What assumptions, what worries, what endless mental conversations occupy the space of your awareness? And what might be possible if you could set some of that down, even just for this moment, creating a little more spaciousness within? Breathe gently. Let your mind become like still water, clear and reflective. The Monk and the Mirror. In a mountain monastery, a young monk approached his teacher with a troubled heart. "Master," he said, "I have been meditating for 3 years, yet my mind is still clouded with thoughts. I see other monks who appear so peaceful, so clear. Why am I still struggling?" The master led the young monk to a small pond near the meditation hall. The surface of the water was disturbed by the wind, creating endless ripples and waves. "Now look into the water," the master said. "What do you see?" "I see only disturbance," the monk replied. "The surface is too agitated to reflect clearly." The master nodded. "Now let us sit here together in silence." They sat by the pond as the afternoon passed into evening. Gradually, as the wind subsided, the surface of the water grew calmer. The ripples became smaller, fewer. Finally, the water became perfectly still, and in its surface appeared a flawless reflection of the moon rising above the mountains. "Now what do you see?" asked the master. "I see the moon reflected perfectly," the young monk replied, his voice filled with wonder. "The water has not changed its essential nature," the master explained. It was always capable of perfect reflection, but only when it became still could this capacity reveal itself. Your mind is like this water. You do not need to create clarity. It is already your true nature. You need only to allow the disturbances to settle. This teaching points to something essential in our practice and in our lives. We often exhaust ourselves trying to create peace, trying to force our minds into stillness. But peace is not something we manufacture. It is something we uncover by ceasing to create disturbance. Each thought, each worry, each mental grasping is like a stone thrown into still water. The water's nature doesn't change, but the ripples temporarily obscure its clarity. When we stop throwing stones, when we stop feeding every thought, chasing every sensation, engaging with every mental story, the water naturally returns to stillness. This does not mean we will never have thoughts. Thoughts will arise just as breezes will occasionally disturb the water's surface. But we can learn not to add to the disturbance, not to create storms from breezes. As you rest here now, notice your own mind. Are there ripples on your inner waters? Can you simply observe them without adding to them? Can you allow them to settle naturally in their own time? Let your breath be gentle, effortless. Let yourself sink deeper into relaxation. Part 2. The Path of Compassion. The Tiger in the Well. A man traveling across a field encountered a tiger and began to run, the tiger chasing close behind. Coming to a cliff, he caught hold of a wild vine and swung himself over the edge. Above him, the tiger sniffed at the cliff's edge. Below him, far below, he saw another tiger waiting, looking hungrily up. The vine that held him was being gnawed by two mice, one white, one black.
Just then, he saw a luscious strawberry growing from the rock face near his hand. Grasping the vine with one hand, he plucked the strawberry with the other. How sweet it tasted! This story often surprises people with its ending. We expect the man to be consumed with fear, to spend his last moments in terror and despair. Instead, he tastes a strawberry and finds it sweet. What is this teaching showing us? It speaks to the practice of being fully present even in difficult circumstances, perhaps especially in difficult circumstances. The tiger above represents the dangers we have fled from, the past we cannot change. The tiger below represents the fears of what may come, the future we cannot control. The mice gnawing the vine represent the constant passage of time, the impermanence of all things, including our own lives. In the middle of all this, the inescapable realities of existence, there is this moment, and in this moment, a strawberry. The teaching is not about ignoring danger or pretending difficulty doesn't exist. It is about not allowing past and future, fear and worry to rob us of the gift of present experience. How often do we miss the strawberry because we are consumed with the tigers? How often does our life pass us by while we are lost in memories of what was or anxieties about what might be? Each moment contains both difficulty and beauty, both challenge and gift. What we choose to place our attention upon shapes our experience profoundly. This is not a teaching of toxic positivity, of forcing ourselves to look on the bright side while denying genuine pain. Rather, it is an invitation to full presence. When we are truly present, we can taste the strawberry fully, and we can also face the tigers with clear eyes and appropriate response. The man in the story has not solved his predicament, but neither has he abandoned himself to despair. He remains alive to this moment, alive to direct experience, alive to the miracle of being aware and capable of tasting sweetness even now. As you rest here, what strawberries are present in this very moment? Perhaps it is the comfort of your bed, the rhythm of your breath, the quiet darkness that surrounds you. Can you taste the sweetness of simply being alive, of having this moment to rest? Let your awareness be soft, open, receiving whatever is present without struggle. Part 3. The Wisdom of Impermanence. The Master's Garden. A Zen master had spent decades cultivating a beautiful garden. Every rock, every plant, every element was placed with perfect care. The garden was his meditation, his teaching, his art. Students would travel from far away just to sit in the garden and absorb its tranquility. One autumn, a tremendous storm approached. The master's attendant said, "Master, we must cover the garden, protect the delicate plants, secure everything we can." The master shook his head. "Leave it as it is." The storm came with incredible force. Rain poured, wind howled, branches broke. The attendant watched in agony as the garden was devastated. By morning, the carefully arranged landscape was scattered with debris, plants uprooted, the serene order transformed into chaos. The attendant approached the master, expecting to find him heartbroken. Instead, the master was smiling, gazing peacefully at the transformed garden. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said. "A completely new teaching. This, too, is the garden's way of being." The attendant was confused. "But Master, your life's work, destroyed in a single night." The master replied gently, "If I had tried to hold on to what was, I would have missed what is. The garden I made was beautiful. This garden that the storm has made is also beautiful. Tomorrow it will be different again. This is the nature of all things. To love something is to allow it to be as it is, including its changing and its passing." This story touches the heart of Buddhist teaching on impermanence, or anicca. Everything changes, everything passes, nothing remains in a fixed state. This is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be understood and accepted. Our suffering often comes from resisting this fundamental truth. We want things to stay as they are when they please us. We want to freeze moments of joy, to prevent loss, to hold on to what we love. But this is like trying to stop a river from flowing. It exhausts us and changes nothing about the nature of reality. The master's response to the destroyed garden shows us another way. Rather than adding suffering to loss through resistance and attachment, we can meet change with openness. This doesn't mean we don't care. The master devoted decades to his garden. Clearly, he cared deeply. But his care was not dependent on things remaining a certain way. He could appreciate what was, and then appreciate what came next, because he understood and accepted the impermanent nature of all things. There's a profound freedom in this acceptance. When we stop demanding that reality be other than it is, when we stop insisting that things last forever, we can actually be more present with them while they're here. The master could enjoy his garden fully precisely because he held it lightly, knowing it would change. What in your life are you trying to keep from changing? What are you holding so tightly that you cannot appreciate it while it is here? What loss are you resisting so strongly that you cannot see what is being born even now? Everything you cherish will change.
Everyone you love will eventually pass. Your own body is changing with each moment, moving toward its eventual dissolution. This is not a morbid teaching, but a liberating one. When we truly accept impermanence, we can live more fully, love more deeply, appreciate more richly, because we know that this moment is unique and will never come again in exactly this way. The storm created a new garden. What storms have passed through your life? What new landscapes have they created? Can you look at them with the Master's eyes, seeing not only loss, but also the birth of something new? Let your breath flow naturally, like changes in a garden. Each inhale is born and passes. Each exhale arises and dissolves. Life itself is this continuous flow. The Merchant and the Ring. A wealthy merchant lived in constant anxiety despite his prosperity. He worried about losing his wealth, about competitors, about the future. His worry robbed him of sleep and joy. One day, a traveling mystic came to his town. The merchant sought him out and described his troubles. "I have everything I thought I wanted, yet I am miserable. What can I do?" The mystic thought for a moment, then removed a simple ring from his finger. "Take this," he said. "When you feel overwhelmed by worry, look at the inscription inside." The merchant examined the ring eagerly, but it appeared to be just a plain band. "There is no inscription." "Not yet," the mystic replied. "Take it to a jeweler and have these words engraved. This too shall pass." The merchant did so. When times were difficult, when worry threatened to consume him, he would look at the ring and read those words, "This too shall pass." And he would remember that his troubles were temporary, that circumstances change, and he would find some peace. Years later, the merchant's business flourished beyond his greatest dreams. He became one of the wealthiest men in the region, celebrated and envied. At a great feast held in his honor, he felt pride swelling in his chest, a sense that he had finally arrived, finally achieved permanent happiness. Then, by chance, his eye fell on the ring he still wore. He turned it to read the inscription he knew so well. "This too shall pass." The words he had once found comforting now disturbed him. This too shall pass. His success, his wealth, this moment of glory, these too would pass. And in that moment, he understood the teaching more deeply than ever before. The words were not just for comfort in hard times, but for wisdom in good times. Nothing lasts, neither suffering nor joy, neither success nor failure. This understanding brought a different quality of peace than before. Not the peace of thinking good times would last forever, but the peace of accepting the flowing nature of all experience. The ring becomes a kind of compass, always pointing toward truth. In pride, it cultivates humility. In despair, it cultivates hope. In attachment, it cultivates release. In aversion, it cultivates acceptance. What would change in your life if you truly internalized this teaching? If you knew, deeply knew, that this moment, whatever it contains, is temporary? Would you hold your joys more lightly? Would you hold your sorrows less tightly? Would you be more present, more appreciative, more fully alive? The words are simple. This too shall pass. But the understanding they point to is vast. They remind us that we are not separate from the great flow of existence. We are part of the changing, temporary, precious dance of life. To accept this is to come home to reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. Rest in this knowing. Let change move through you like breath, like seasons. You need not resist it. The Stone Buddha. In a remote valley stood an ancient temple with a stone Buddha statue that had weathered centuries of wind, rain, and sun. The statue was beloved by villagers who would come to offer prayers and seek guidance. One year, a severe earthquake shook the valley. The temple was destroyed, and the Buddha statue, which had stood for centuries, fell and shattered into many pieces. The villagers were devastated. They gathered the pieces, but the Buddha could not be reassembled. "Our protector is gone. The Buddha has abandoned us," they wailed. An old monk who had long lived in silence in a cave above the village came down and sat among the grieving people. He picked up one of the fragments of the statue and held it up to the sunlight. "Look," he said softly, "the Buddha that stood for centuries was beautiful, and now it is gone. But look at this piece. See how the sun illuminates it in a way it never could when it was part of the whole? See the texture of the stone, the grain that was hidden inside. This too is beautiful. This too reveals truth." He picked up another piece, and this piece, see how its broken edge catches the light. See what it shows us what was within. The Buddha that was is no more, but new Buddhas appear wherever we choose to see them.
The old monk smiled at the confused faces around him. The stone Buddha was a symbol to remind you of the Buddha nature that exists in all things, in all moments. That nature has not been destroyed. The statue was made of stone and followed the way of stone to eventually break and return to earth. But what it pointed to, the awakened nature of reality itself, that cannot be broken, that cannot be destroyed. It simply takes new forms. Gradually, understanding dawned on some faces. The villagers began to look at the fragments differently. Some took pieces home and placed them in their gardens, finding meaning in the broken forms. Others built small shrines around the scattered pieces, creating not one Buddha, but many. Children used some of the smaller fragments as stepping stones to cross a stream, so that the Buddha helped them on their way. The temple was never rebuilt in the same form. Instead, the valley became filled with small shrines, each holding a piece of the original Buddha, each a reminder that the sacred is not contained in any single form, but pervades all things. This story offers us multiple teachings. First, it shows us again the truth of impermanence. Even something as seemingly eternal as a stone Buddha, standing for centuries, eventually changes and breaks. Nothing escapes this truth. But more importantly, it teaches us about the difference between form and essence. The villagers' initial response was to equate the form, the physical statue, with what it represented. When the form was destroyed, they believed they had lost what was essential. The old monk redirected their attention to essence. The physical Buddha was always just a reminder, a pointer, a symbol. What it pointed to, the nature of awakening, the potential for enlightenment, the sacredness of existence, these cannot be destroyed because they are not dependent on any particular form. This teaching is particularly relevant in times of loss. When we lose someone we love, when a chapter of our life ends, when our health fails, when our plans shatter, we can feel that something essential has been destroyed. And in one sense, it has. The form we cherished is gone, but the essence, the love that was shared, the lessons that were learned, the growth that occurred, these are not destroyed. They have become part of us in ways that can never be taken away. They simply take new forms. The villagers discovered that instead of one Buddha, they now had many. Instead of one way to encounter the sacred, they had countless ways. What seemed like a devastating loss became an opening to a more pervasive, more intimate relationship with what the Buddha represented. What in your life has been broken? What forms have been destroyed? Can you sense that something essential remains, even as the form has changed? Can you see the new possibilities that have emerged from the breaking? The light falling on the fragments showed what had always been hidden inside the stone. Sometimes it takes breaking for us to see what was always there, the beauty within, the truth that was concealed, the new possibilities that were waiting to emerge. Allow yourself to rest in this teaching. You are more than any particular form your life has taken. Your essence remains, even as the forms continuously change. Breathe gently. Let the teaching settle into your heart without force. Part 4. The Practice of Presence. The Tea Master and the Samurai. A famous tea master, known for his serene presence and exquisite tea ceremonies, was traveling to the capital to perform for the emperor. Along the way, he accidentally bumped into a samurai warrior in the street. The samurai was drunk and belligerent. "How dare you touch me?" he roared. "I challenge you to a duel tomorrow at dawn." The tea master, who had no training in combat, bowed politely and accepted the challenge. He knew he would likely die, but to refuse would bring dishonor. He spent the rest of the day preparing himself, arranging his affairs, and making peace with his fate. In the evening, he sought out a master swordsman and explained his situation. He said, "I am going to die tomorrow. I do not ask you to teach me to win. There is not enough time, but I wish to die with dignity. Please teach me how a samurai faces death." The swordsman was moved by the tea master's courage. "First," he said, "show me how you serve tea." The tea master was puzzled but agreed. He prepared the tea ceremony with complete attention, his movements graceful and precise. He was fully present with each gesture, each moment. There was no hurry, no distraction, no self-consciousness. He was simply there, completely engaged in the action of preparing and serving tea. When he finished, the swordsman bowed deeply. "There is your answer," he said. "Tomorrow, when you face the samurai, do not think of winning or losing, of living or dying. Simply be as present as you were just now in serving tea. Face death exactly as you face tea, with complete attention and no attachment to outcome." The next morning, the tea master arrived at the appointed place. He stood quietly, breathing naturally, his mind clear. He was neither defiant nor afraid. He was simply present, just as he was when serving tea. The samurai arrived, still angry but now sober. He drew his sword and looked at his opponent. What he saw stopped him. The tea master's presence had transformed him. Without saying a word, without making any aggressive move, he embodied something the samurai recognized, the fearlessness that comes from complete presence. The samurai lowered his sword and bowed. "Forgive me," he said. "I was drunk and foolish. You have taught me something about true courage." He turned and walked away. This story beautifully illustrates the power of presence. The tea master faced his potential death the same way he faced serving tea, with complete attention, without resistance, fully engaged in each moment as it arose. What gave him this capability? It was not something he learned overnight. It was the fruit of years of practice, of being fully present with whatever he was doing. The tea ceremony had trained him not just in the external forms of preparing tea, but in the internal practice of complete presence. We often think of presence as something vague or mystical, but this story shows it as very concrete. Presence means bringing your full attention to this moment, to this action, without the mind wandering to past or future, without being split between what you are doing and what you are thinking about. When we are truly present, we become powerful in a way that has nothing to do with force. Presence itself is a kind of spiritual authority. It communicates something that goes beyond words, that we are fully here, fully engaged, not holding back or resisting, not lost in thought or fantasy. The tea master could meet death with such equanimity because he had practiced meeting each moment of life with the same quality of attention.
This is the great secret of spiritual practice. How we do anything is how we do everything. If we are present and attentive while washing dishes, we develop the capacity to be present and attentive in all circumstances, even the most challenging. Most of us live much of our lives only partially present. We eat while thinking about work. We work while thinking about home. We are with loved ones while thinking about what we need to do next. We are physically in one place while mentally in another. We are always somewhere else, somewhen else, anyone else. This divided attention creates a kind of chronic suffering, a sense that we are not quite living our lives. Life passes by while we are lost in thought, lost in worry, lost in planning and remembering. We miss the actual taste of the tea, the actual feeling of this breath, the actual beauty of this moment. The practice of presence is simple but not easy. It asks us to return again and again to this moment. When the mind wanders to the past or future, we gently bring it back. When we notice we are lost in thought, we return to direct experience. When we catch ourselves going through the motions unconsciously, we wake up and engage fully. Over time, this practice transforms us. We become like the tea master, capable of meeting whatever arises with steadiness and clarity. We develop the capacity to be fully alive, fully present, no matter what the moment contains. As you rest here now, can you be completely present with the experience of resting? Not thinking about resting, not judging the quality of your rest, but actually present with the sensations, the breath, the feeling of being supported by the bed. Can you bring the same quality of attention to this simple act as the tea master brought to serving tea?
This is not a small thing. This is the practice that transforms life. This is how we learn to meet each moment, including our last moment, with grace. Let your awareness settle into direct experience. Notice without judging. Be present without effort. The abbot's silence. A monastery was known throughout the land for the wisdom of its abbot. People would travel for weeks to ask him questions about the deepest teachings of Buddhism. But there was something strange about this abbot. He had not spoken a word in 20 years. Students would come and ask their questions, and the abbot would simply sit in silence, looking at them with clear, kind eyes. Some students became frustrated and left. Others sat in the silence with him, and many of these students came to deep understanding without a word being exchanged. One day, a scholar arrived, full of learning and questions. He had studied all the sutras, mastered all the philosophical arguments. He asked the abbot an intricate question about the nature of emptiness and form, speaking for nearly an hour, displaying his vast knowledge. The abbot sat in silence, as always. The scholar grew impatient. "Are you not going to answer? Do you not understand my question? Perhaps your reputation exceeds your actual wisdom." Still, the abbot remained silent, but his eyes held no judgment, no defensiveness. He simply sat, present and peaceful. The scholar stood to leave, disappointed and somewhat angry. But as he reached the door, something made him pause. He turned back and looked at the abbot again. In that moment, something shifted in his perception. The silence was not empty, it was full. It was not withholding, it was offering. The abbot was answering, had been answering all along, but not with words. The scholar slowly returned and sat down. This time he did not speak. He sat in silence with the abbot. Hours passed. As the light changed in the room, as his mind gradually quieted, the scholar began to understand. All his questions had been attempts to grasp intellectually what could only be known directly. All his sophisticated inquiries had been ways of avoiding the simple truth that was available in silence. The words of the sutras he had memorized were pointing to something beyond words. The philosophy he had mastered was a finger pointing at the moon, and he had been studying the finger while missing the moon entirely. In that silence, without a single word being spoken, the scholar encountered what he had been seeking, not an answer to his questions, but a dissolution of the questioner. Not more knowledge, but direct knowing. When he finally stood to leave, much later, he bowed deeply to the abbot. The abbot bowed in return. Still, no words were exchanged. None were needed. This story teaches us about the limitations of conceptual understanding. Words and concepts are useful tools, but they can also become obstacles. We can become so focused on understanding things intellectually, on having the right ideas and explanations, that we miss the direct experience that lies beneath all concepts. The abbot's 20 years of silence was not a rejection of language, but a recognition that some truths cannot be transmitted through words. The deepest teachings are not information to be conveyed from one mind to another. They are realizations to be awakened within each person's direct experience. How much of your life is spent in words, in thinking, planning, analyzing, remembering, imagining? All of this mental activity has its place, but beneath it is something deeper, the simple presence of awareness itself, the direct experience of being alive, the wordless knowing that exists before and after all our thinking. The scholar had to exhaust his questions, had to sit with his impatience and frustration, had to let his busy mind gradually settle before he could encounter what the abbot was offering. Sometimes we too must let our mental activity settle like sediment in a jar of water before we can see clearly. This silence is always available. Beneath all the noise of your thoughts, beneath all the words and stories running through your mind, there is a vast silence. It is not empty or dead. It is alive, aware, peaceful. It is your true nature, always present, waiting to be noticed. You need not achieve this silence. You need not create it or earn it. You only need to stop overlooking it. In this very moment, as you rest here, it is present. Can you sense it? Not with your thinking mind, but with a deeper awareness. Let yourself sink into this silence. Let it hold you. Let it reveal what words cannot express. Part 5. The Way of Non-Attachment. The Hermit's Hut. What would it feel like to hold everything more lightly? Not to have less, necessarily, but to need less? Not to stop enjoying things, but to stop depending on them for your sense of well-being. The teaching here is profound. Freedom comes not from having everything you might want, but from reducing what you need. True wealth is not an abundance of possessions, but an abundance of peace. Real security comes not from accumulating and protecting, but from releasing and trusting. As you rest here, notice, what is actually necessary for your well-being in this moment? Strip away everything extra, all the things you think you need, all the conditions you believe must be met before you can be at peace. What remains? Perhaps just this: awareness, breath, the simple fact of being alive.
This is your true wealth. Everything else is extra. Appreciated when present, released when it passes, never mistaken for the source of your well-being. Breathe easily. Rest in the simplicity of just being. The Potter's Bowl. A master potter created bowls of extraordinary beauty. Each one was unique, perfectly balanced, glazed in colors that seemed to capture light itself. People traveled from distant lands to purchase his bowls, paying enormous sums. Despite his success and the high prices his work commanded, the potter lived simply. He would often give his bowls away to those who appreciated them but could not afford them. His fellow craftspeople thought he was foolish. "Why do you charge some people so much and give the same quality bowls to others for free?" they asked. "You could be wealthy beyond measure if you simply sold every piece to the highest bidder." The potter was working at his wheel as they spoke, his hands shaping clay with practiced grace. "Watch," he said. He formed a beautiful bowl. Then, while it was still wet and perfect on the wheel, he crushed it back into a lump of clay and began again. His fellow potters gasped. "Why did you destroy it? It was perfect." "It was," the potter agreed, "and now it is perfect potential again. If I became attached to every bowl I make, if I clutched at each one as if it were the only thing I would ever create, I would lose the freedom that allows me to create. I would become tight, anxious, protective. My hands would lose their ease, and my bowls would lose their beauty." He continued shaping the clay. "Each bowl I make is complete in itself. When it is finished, it is finished. If someone pays for it, good. If I give it away, good. If it breaks, good. If it becomes a treasured heirloom, good. My work is in the making, not in the keeping. The clay teaches me this. It is constantly being formed and reformed, shaped and reshaped. Nothing is permanent. Why should I pretend otherwise?" One of the potters asked, "But doesn't it hurt when a bowl you've created breaks? Don't you feel loss?" "I feel what I feel. Sadness, perhaps, the way I might feel sad when a flower wilts or a season ends, but not the deep suffering that comes from believing that something permanent has been destroyed. The bowl was always temporary. Its breaking is part of its nature, not a violation of it. And besides," he smiled, "it has now returned to dust, which will become clay again, which will become new bowls. Nothing is truly lost." The potter's bowl emerged on the wheel, graceful and whole. "This bowl will last years or days, I do not know which. While I make it completely with full attention and care. When it leaves my hands, I release it completely. This is how I remain free to create."
This story deepens our understanding of non-attachment. The potter shows us that non-attachment does not mean not caring. He clearly cares deeply about his craft, about creating beauty, about the quality of his work, but he holds the fruits of his work lightly. There is a beautiful paradox here. The potter can create such exceptional bowls precisely because he is not attached to them. His non-attachment allows him the freedom to take risks, to crush a nearly perfect bowl and start over, to give his work away freely. If he clutched at each piece, he would become tight, controlling, afraid, and that tightness would show in his work. This applies to all areas of life. When we hold things too tightly, our relationships, our plans, our accomplishments, our ideas, we squeeze the life out of them. We cannot control them into permanence, but we can suffocate them with our clinging. The potter's wisdom extends to understanding that nothing is truly lost. Form changes, but essence remains. The broken bowl returns to dust, which becomes clay, which becomes new bowls. This is the cycle of all things. What appears to be ending is simultaneously beginning. What seems to be lost is transforming. When we understand this deeply, we can give ourselves fully to creating, to loving, to living, without the constant anxiety of trying to make things permanent. We can pour our hearts into what we do, knowing that the results will be what they will be, that nothing lasts forever, and that this is not a problem, but simply the nature of reality. The potter's hands are free because his heart is free. He creates without grasping at the created. He cares without clutching. He makes beautiful things without needing them to validate him, or define him, or last forever. What are you creating in your life? Your work, your relationships, your daily activities. Can you give yourself to them fully while holding the results lightly? Can you create your life like the potter creates his bowls, with complete attention and care, but without attachment to outcomes, without demanding that things last forever? This is the dance of engagement and release. We participate fully in life. We care deeply. We create and love and strive. And simultaneously, we hold it all lightly, knowing that everything is temporary, everything is changing, and that this impermanence is not a flaw, but the very nature of existence. Let yourself rest in this understanding. You need not clutch at anything to appreciate it. You need not make things permanent to value them. Everything you create, everything you love, is already perfect in its temporariness. Breathe, release, trust the process of forming and reforming. The monk who laughed. There was once a monk who seemed to find humor in everything, not in a disrespectful or frivolous way, but with a deep, joyful appreciation for the absurdities and contradictions of life. While other monks were serious and somber, he would often laugh softly to himself during meditation, smile while doing chores, chuckle while reading the scriptures. Some of the other monks were disturbed by this. "The spiritual path is serious business," they complained to the abbot. "This monk treats everything as a joke. He does not show proper reverence." The abbot summoned the laughing monk. "Venerable teacher, it is said that you laugh too much, that you do not take your practice seriously. What do you have to say?" The monk smiled. "Venerable teacher, I laugh not because I take my practice lightly, but because I have begun to see how seriously I once took myself. I spent years weighed down by spiritual ambition, by the need to be a good Buddhist, by judgment of myself and others. I was so serious about becoming enlightened that I never noticed I was already free. I was just holding myself in prison with all my striving and grasping and self-criticism." He continued, "Now when I sit in meditation and notice my mind has wandered for the 1,000th time, instead of berating myself, I laugh gently at this mind that keeps wandering away and coming back. When I read the scriptures teaching non-attachment and notice I am attached to being non-attached, the irony makes me smile. When I try so hard to be humble that I become proud of my humility, how can I not laugh at this?" The abbot listened carefully. "Go on." "I see people suffering because they hold on to anger, while I was holding on to my righteous intention to let go of anger, another form of holding. I see people attached to their possessions, while I was attached to my renunciation, still attachment. I see people desperate for approval, while I was desperate for spiritual achievement, still desperation. The forms change, but the pattern remains, and once you see this pattern clearly, how can you not laugh?" The abbot began to smile. "You laugh at the cosmic joke." "Yes," said the monk. "The truth has been here all along, right in front of us, but we keep looking past it, seeking something more special, more complicated. We already are what we're trying to become. We already have what we're seeking. The freedom we're striving for is found not at the end of some difficult journey, but in releasing the belief that we need to journey at all. And here we all sit, working so hard to get somewhere we already are. Tell me, teacher, is that not worth a smile?" The abbot laughed deeply, the sound filling the hall.
Perhaps we need more laughter in this monastery. The Dharma is indeed serious, but we need not be. Continue your practice, laughing monk. Your smile may teach others what my serious face has not. This story addresses an important aspect of spiritual practice that is often overlooked: the danger of spiritual seriousness. We can become so earnest in our seeking, so grave in our practice, that we create a new form of suffering. The laughing monk had discovered something crucial. The ego can co-opt even spiritual practice. We can become attached to being detached, proud of being humble, judgmental of being judgmental. We can turn the path to liberation into another burden, another set of goals to achieve, another way to feel inadequate. Humor, in this context, is not frivolity. It is a form of wisdom. It arises from seeing clearly the ways we trap ourselves, the ways we complicate what is simple, the ways we seek everywhere for what we already have. When we see these patterns clearly, with compassion for ourselves, laughter is a natural response. The monk's laughter was gentle, not cruel. He was not laughing at people's suffering, but at the unnecessary layers of complication we add to life. He was not dismissing the spiritual path, but seeing through the ego's attempt to make itself important even in the process of transcendence. There is a profound freedom in being able to laugh at ourselves, to hold our spiritual practices and realizations lightly, to recognize that the freedom we seek is not some distant achievement, but available right now in our willingness to stop taking ourselves so seriously. This doesn't mean we don't practice with dedication or sincerity. The laughing monk was clearly committed to his path, but his commitment was light, joyful, free from the burden of spiritual ambition and the weight of self-importance. How seriously do you take yourself? How heavy has your spiritual seeking become? Are you carrying your practice like a burden, or has it become a source of lightness and joy? Can you see the humor in your own contradictions, your own patterns of seeking and grasping? The cosmic joke the monk spoke of is this: we are already whole, already free, already home. But we keep looking away from this simple truth, seeking something more exotic, more difficult to attain, more impressive. We complicate what is simple. We seek elsewhere for what is here. We believe we need to become something other than what we are. When this is seen clearly, deeply, a natural response is laughter, not bitter or mocking, but warm and liberating. The tension of seeking releases, the weight of spiritual ambition drops away. We discover that we can practice with dedication while simultaneously not taking ourselves so seriously. Rest in this lightness. Let whatever weight you're carrying be eased by a gentle smile at the human comedy we're all part of. You are allowed to be light-hearted on your path. You are allowed to find joy even in your struggles. You are allowed to laugh. Breathe easily. Let a small smile soften your face. Rest in the humor and grace of being human. Part 6. Meditation and Mindfulness. The River of Thought. A young woman came to a meditation teacher in great frustration. "I have been trying to meditate for months," she said, "but I cannot stop my thoughts. Every time I sit down to practice, my mind is full of noise, worries, plans, memories, fantasies. I am failing at meditation." The teacher invited her to walk with him to a nearby river. They sat on the bank and watched the water flow past. The river was moving swiftly, carrying leaves, branches, foam, all manner of things on its current. "Tell me," the teacher said, "should the river stop flowing?" "No, of course not," the woman replied. "That is the nature of a river, to flow." "And yet you demand that your mind stop flowing. the teacher observed. You sit in meditation expecting your mind to become still like a pond, and when it continues to flow like a river, you judge yourself as failing. He picked up a leaf and dropped it into the river. They watched it float away on the current. Your thoughts are like leaves on this river. They arise, they float past, they disappear. This is natural. The problem is not that thoughts appear. The problem is that you try to dam the river. You grab at some leaves because you like them. You push away other leaves because you dislike them. You try to stop the flow itself. Then what should I do? The woman asked. Sit beside the river, the teacher said simply. Watch it flow. Let the leaves float past without grabbing them or pushing them away. Some thoughts are pleasant, some are unpleasant. Let them both pass. Some thoughts are important, some are trivial. Let them both pass. You are not in the river. You are not the leaves. You are the awareness that witnesses the flow. He continued, as you stop interfering with the river, something interesting happens. The river may still flow, but you are no longer disturbed by its flowing. You rest in the awareness that observes. And sometimes, naturally, without you trying to force it, the river becomes calmer. But even when it is turbulent, you remain peaceful, because you are not identified with the turbulence. You are the spacious awareness in which all this occurs. The woman sat quietly by the river for a long time, watching, allowing, releasing her struggle with her own mind. This teaching is essential for anyone who meditates or seeks inner peace. The common misconception is that meditation is about stopping thoughts, emptying the mind, achieving some special state of blank consciousness. When people try this and inevitably fail, because thoughts are what minds do, they conclude they cannot meditate. But meditation is not about stopping the river of thought. It is about changing our relationship to it. Instead of being caught in the current, swept along by every thought, we learn to sit beside the river. We learn to observe without being pulled in. We develop the capacity to witness our thoughts without identifying with them, without believing them all, without needing to act on them. This shift in perspective is profound. When you are identified with your thoughts, you are the river, turbulent, constantly changing, at the mercy of whatever appears in consciousness. When you recognize yourself as awareness witnessing the thoughts, you are the spacious presence in which the river flows, peaceful, unchanging, undisturbed by the movement within it. This practice is simple but requires patience. You sit, thoughts arise, you notice them without judgment. Ah, there's a thought about work. There's a worry about tomorrow. There's a memory from yesterday. You don't try to stop them. You don't grasp at pleasant thoughts or push away unpleasant thoughts. You simply observe and gently return attention to your breath or body or whatever your anchor is. At first, you will forget to observe. You will get caught in the current over and over, swept downstream by a thought before you even notice. This is normal. The practice is in the noticing, in the returning. Each time you realize you've been lost in thought and gently come back to presence, you are strengthening your capacity to witness rather than identify. Over time, something shifts. Thoughts still arise, they always will, but they have less power over you. A worry appears, and instead of being consumed by it, you notice there is worry present. An angry thought arises, and instead of acting it out or suppressing it, you observe there is anger moving through. You create space around your thoughts, and in that space you find freedom. The river keeps flowing, but you are no longer drowning in it. You sit on the bank, at ease, watching the endless parade of mental content drift by. Some days the river is calm, some days turbulent, but you remain, the awareness that witnesses all states, undisturbed by none.
This is the fruit of meditation practice, not a permanent state of bliss or the permanent absence of thought, but a fundamental shift in your relationship to your own mind. You discover that you are not your thoughts. You have thoughts, but you are the awareness in which thoughts appear. This realization alone is profoundly liberating. As you rest here now, can you sense this awareness? Not the thoughts, but the space in which thoughts appear. Not the content of your mind, but the consciousness that knows the content. This awareness is your true nature. It is always here, always peaceful, always free. You need only stop identifying with the river and rest as the space that holds it. Let your breath flow naturally.
The anchor in the storm. A sailor had survived many storms at sea. When asked his secret, he said, "I have learned where to place my anchor." But in a storm, someone protested, the anchor may not hold. The waves are too powerful, the wind too strong. "You misunderstand," the sailor replied. "I do not speak of the iron anchor that holds my ship in place. I speak of the anchor of my attention. In a storm, if I let my attention be swept away by every wave, by every gust of wind, by every fearful thought of what might happen, I am lost. The outer storm is joined by an inner storm, and I cannot navigate." He continued, "But I have learned to anchor my attention to something stable within myself. Sometimes it is my breath, watching it come and go, steady and rhythmic even while the ship tosses. Sometimes it is the feeling of my feet on the deck, the solidity of the body even in turbulent seas. Sometimes it is simply the awareness itself, the eye that observes the storm without being the storm. This anchor does not stop the storm. The waves still crash, the wind still howls, but I remain centered, capable of responding rather than reacting, making clear decisions rather than panicking. The outer turbulence continues, but the inner turbulence ceases." A young person asked, "Can this work in the storms of life, not just at sea?" The sailor smiled. "The seas I speak of are not only water. When illness comes, when loss arrives, when circumstances turn against you, these too are storms. If you let your attention be swept away by fear, by worry, by endless what-ifs, you double your suffering. The actual storm is bad enough, but you add to it immensely with the storm of your mental resistance to it and proliferation. But if you anchor your attention, returning again and again to your breath, to your body, to this present moment rather than fearful futures or regretted pasts, you discover a stability that is not dependent on external conditions. You can be calm in the center while the edges churn. The practice is simple. Notice when your attention has been swept away by the storm of thoughts and emotions. Gently bring it back to your anchor, the breath, the body, the present moment, again and again, as many times as necessary. This is not avoidance of the storm, it is learning to navigate through it with clarity. This teaching beautifully illustrates the practice of mindfulness in difficult times. It is easy to be present when life is calm, when nothing threatens, when all is going well. The real test of practice comes in the storms, when we are ill, grieving, afraid, overwhelmed, facing loss or change or uncertainty. In these moments, our tendency is to be swept away into mental proliferation. One worry leads to another, one fear spirals into catastrophic thinking. We leave the present moment where the actual experience is happening and get lost in terrible futures that exist only in imagination. The actual storm is bad enough, but we add to it immensely with the storm of our mental resistance and proliferation. The sailor's wisdom is in recognizing that we always have a choice about where to place our attention.
We cannot always control external circumstances. The storm comes whether we want it or not. But we can learn to work with our attention, to bring it back again and again to something stable and present. The breath is perhaps the most universal anchor. It is always available, always present, always connected to this moment. When you notice you are lost in worried thoughts about the future, you can return to the breath. When you catch yourself replaying painful memories, you can return to the breath. The breath becomes like a home base, a place of refuge that you can always return to. The body is another powerful anchor. Feeling your feet on the ground, the sensation of your hands, the weight of your body, these sensations root you in present reality rather than imagined futures or remembered pasts. The body always exists now, never yesterday or tomorrow. And most fundamentally, there is awareness itself. Even when circumstances are turbulent, even when emotions are intense, even when thoughts are racing, awareness itself remains steady. The screen on which the movie plays is never disturbed by the content of the movie. The space in which the storm occurs is never touched by the storm. The practice is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending everything is fine. It is about not adding unnecessary suffering through mental proliferation. Feel what you feel, face what you must face, but keep returning your attention to the anchor. Keep coming back to presence, to breath, to body, to this moment as it actually is, rather than how you fear it might become. This practice must be developed in calm waters before it is tested in storms. You cannot wait until crisis arrives to begin learning. Start now in the ordinary moments of life, practicing returning to your anchor. Notice when your mind has wandered into past or future and gently bring it back. Practice in small storms, in minor irritations, small disappointments, everyday stresses. Then, when the larger storms come, you will have developed the capacity to remain centered, not because you are enlightened or special, but because you have practiced. The anchor holds not because the storm is weak, but because the anchor has been set deep through repeated practice. As you rest here, practice now. Let your breath be your anchor. Each time you notice your mind has wandered into thought, gently, without judgment, return to the breath. Feel it flowing in and out. Let it be a place of stability, of presence, of peace. This is the practice that will serve you in all the storms of life. Breathe. Return. Anchor. Rest.
This teaching is crucial for integrating meditation into daily life. Many people think of meditation as something separate from life, something you do for 20 minutes in the morning and then set aside. But the real fruit of meditation practice is the capacity to be present throughout your day, not just during formal practice. Walking meditation is an accessible way to begin this integration. Walking is something we do every day, often multiple times. Usually we walk while thinking about something else, our minds in the future or past, while our bodies move through space. We use walking merely as transportation, a means to an end, something to get through so we can arrive somewhere else. But what if walking itself could be a practice? What if each step could be taken with full awareness, with appreciation for the miracle of the body, with presence to this moment? Then, walking becomes not just a way to get from here to there, but a way to arrive fully in the here and now. The practice is simple. As you walk, pay attention to the physical sensations. Feel the heel strike the ground, the weight shift forward, the toes push off. Feel the movement of your legs, the swing of your arms, the rhythm of your breath. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently bring it back to the sensations of walking.
You don't need to walk slowly, though slow walking can be helpful when learning. You can walk at a natural pace and still be mindful. The key is not the speed, but the quality of attention. Are you present with this step, or are you already mentally at your destination? This practice has many benefits. It calms the mind, grounds you in your body, brings you into the present moment. But more than that, it begins to break down the artificial separation between practice time and ordinary life. If you can be present while walking, you can be present while doing anything. If you can meditate while in motion, you can meditate while engaged with the world. Gradually, this quality of mindful attention can infuse all your activities. You wash dishes with full awareness of the warm water, the smooth plates, the simple action of cleaning. You eat with full attention to the flavors, textures, the nourishment entering your body. You listen to others with complete presence, not planning your response, but actually hearing what is being said. This is the true fruit of meditation, not achieving some special state, but learning to show up fully for your own life, not spending your days lost in thought, missing the actual experience of being alive, not walking through your life asleep on autopilot, always somewhere else. Every step is an opportunity to wake up. Every moment is an invitation to presence. The question is simply, will you accept? Let yourself rest deeply now. Let your breath be easy, natural. Tomorrow, when you walk, remember, you can practice with every step. Part 7. Stories of Enlightenment. The Sound in Silence. A monk had practiced meditation intensely for many years. He had studied with great masters, mastered complex practices, and could sit in deep concentration for hours. Yet enlightenment eluded him. He felt he was missing something essential, but could not name what it was. In frustration, he left the monastery and wandered into the mountains, abandoning his formal practice. He found a cave and lived there simply, with no agenda, no striving, nothing to achieve. He let his days unfold naturally, gathering food, watching the seasons change, sitting by the stream. One autumn evening, he was sitting outside his cave as night fell. He was not meditating in any formal sense, just sitting, watching the light fade from the sky. The sounds of the day gradually quieted. Birds settled into sleep. The wind died down. A profound silence descended. And in that silence, he suddenly heard it. A sound so subtle it was almost not a sound at all. It was not separate from the silence, but somehow within it, like the silence was alive, vibrating at a frequency just below perception. It had always been there, he realized, but he had never been quiet enough to hear it. In that moment, something released. All his years of striving, of trying to achieve enlightenment, of thinking there was something he needed to get or somewhere he needed to arrive, it all dropped away. He saw that what he had been seeking had been here all along, in every moment, but his very seeking had obscured it. Enlightenment was not something to achieve, it was something to notice. It was not somewhere else or some other time, it was here, now, in the simple presence of this moment. It was not a special state to attain, but the natural state obscured by all his effort to attain it. He laughed softly in the darkness, all those years of complex practices, and the answer was simply to stop, to be still enough to notice what had always been present, the sound in the silence, the awareness beneath the thinking, the peace that existed before all his seeking for peace. He did not become a different person. Nothing magical happened. He simply saw clearly what had always been true, that his true nature was already free, already whole, already at peace. He had been like someone searching frantically for glasses that were already on his face. The next morning, he returned to the monastery. The other monks noticed something different about him, though they could not say what it was. He seemed lighter, more at ease.
He still practiced meditation, but now without the desperate grasping that had characterized his earlier practice. He sat not to get somewhere, but because he was already here. When students asked him about enlightenment, he would smile and say, "Stop trying so hard. Be quiet enough to hear what is already singing." This story points to something paradoxical about spiritual seeking. The very effort to become enlightened can be what prevents enlightenment. As long as we believe that we are not already what we seek, that enlightenment is something to achieve in the future, we reinforce the illusion of separation from our true nature. The monk had to abandon his intensive practice, his striving, his agenda, before he could discover what had always been present. This doesn't mean that practice is useless. His years of meditation had prepared him, had refined his capacity for attention and stillness. But at a certain point, even practice had to be released. This is one of the deepest teachings in Zen. You cannot try to be what you already are. Your true nature is not something you achieve through effort, but something you notice when effort ceases. It's like trying hard to fall asleep. The very trying prevents sleep. You have to stop trying and allow sleep to happen naturally. Enlightenment, in this view, is not a dramatic transformation, but a simple recognition. It's seeing what was always obvious but overlooked. It's like suddenly seeing the solution to a puzzle that had seemed complex. Once you see it, you realize it was always there, hiding in plain sight. The sound in the silence is a beautiful metaphor. Silence is not empty or dead. It is alive, vibrant, full. But we usually fill the silence with our own noise, our thoughts, our agendas, our constant mental activity. When we become still enough, quiet enough, we can notice what is already present, the simple awareness, the peaceful presence, the fundamental okayness that exists before all our stories about what is wrong and what needs fixing. This doesn't mean we stop practicing. The monk returned to the monastery and continued his practice, but now his practice had a different flavor. It was no longer driven by lack, by the belief that he was inadequate and needed to become something else. It was an expression of what already was, a celebration rather than a desperate seeking. What would it mean to stop trying so hard? To release, even just for a moment, the belief that you need to become something other than you are. To be quiet enough to notice what is already present beneath all your seeking. You don't need to achieve anything to be worthy of peace. You don't need to transform yourself to be acceptable. You are already what you have been seeking. The peace you long for is already present, waiting to be noticed beneath the noise of your striving. Be still. Listen. Can you hear the sound in the silence? Can you sense the presence that exists before all your thoughts about yourself? This is your true nature, always here, never absent, only overlooked. Rest in this understanding. Nothing to achieve, nowhere to go, already home.
The weight of enlightenment. Two monks met on a forest path. They had been friends as young students, but had not seen each other in 20 years, having trained at different monasteries. The first monk spoke excitedly. "My friend, I have wonderful news. After years of practice, I have achieved enlightenment. I have transcended suffering, realized emptiness, awakened to my true nature." The second monk smiled and nodded, saying nothing. The first monk continued, "Are you not impressed? Do you not want to hear about my realization? I can teach you what I have learned." The second monk said gently, "Come, let us walk together." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then the first monk, still eager to share his achievement, said again, "I really have attained something remarkable. My mind is so clear now. I see through all illusions. I am no longer bound by ordinary concerns." The second monk stopped and looked at his friend with kind eyes. "Tell me," he said, "this enlightenment you have achieved, how heavy is it?" The first monk looked confused. Heavy? Enlightenment is not heavy, it is light, free. And yet you have been carrying it with you all this time, showing it to me, talking about it, holding it up for examination. If it were truly light, would you not have set it down by now? The first monk was silent, a realization dawning. The second monk continued softly. When I was young, I too sought enlightenment as an achievement, something to attain and possess. I meditated intensely, studied deeply, and one day had a profound experience that I believed was awakening. I felt I had finally arrived, that I had achieved what I set out to do. But then my teacher asked me a simple question, "What now?" And I realized I was stuck. I had made enlightenment into a thing to possess, an identity to wear, an achievement to protect. I had traded one form of burden for another. He paused, then said, "True freedom is not about achieving a special state called enlightenment. It is about releasing all burdens, including the burden of enlightenment itself. It is about being so ordinary, so simple, so unremarkable that there is nothing left to protect or defend or prove." The first monk felt something releasing in his chest. He had been so proud of his achievement, so eager to be recognized as enlightened, that he had created a new form of bondage. "So what should I do?" he asked. "Let it go," his friend said simply. "Your experience was real, your insight was genuine, but now release your grip on it. Don't make it into an identity or an achievement. Let enlightenment enlighten you so much that even the word enlightenment can be dropped. Be so free that you don't need to call yourself free." They continued walking together, two ordinary men on an ordinary path, and in their ordinariness was a peace that needed no name. This story addresses a subtle trap that spiritual seekers can fall into, making enlightenment itself into an ego achievement. The first monk had genuine insight, but he had grasped it, turned it into something he owned, something that made him special or superior. His enlightenment had become a burden rather than a liberation. There is a famous Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." The activities don't change. Life continues in its ordinary way. What changes is the freedom from needing to be special, from needing to prove anything, from carrying the burden of any identity, including the identity of being enlightened. True freedom is so complete that it includes the freedom from the needing to be free. It is so ordinary that it does not set itself apart. The person who has deeply realized their true nature does not go around announcing it, does not need others to recognize it, does not make it into a special achievement. This teaching can be uncomfortable because it undermines our spiritual ambitions. We want enlightenment to make us special, to set us apart, to be something we can achieve and hold up for admiration. But that very wanting is another form of the ego's game, another way of seeking validation and importance. The second monk's question, "How heavy is it?" cuts to the heart of the matter. Anything you carry becomes a burden. Any identity you construct becomes a limitation. Any achievement you cling to becomes a weight. True enlightenment is the release of all burdens, including the burden of enlightenment itself. This doesn't mean that realization is meaningless or that awakening doesn't matter. It means that real awakening is so complete that it doesn't need to announce itself, doesn't create a new self-image, doesn't separate the awakened one from others. It is a return to simplicity, to ordinariness, to the humble acknowledgement that you are not special, and that this not specialness is itself the liberation. What are you carrying that could be set down? What spiritual achievements, what insights, what special knowledge have you turned into a burden? Can you set them all down and simply be here, ordinary,
nothing special, free from the need to be anything other than you are in this moment. Enlightenment, if we must use the word, is not something you have, it is something you are when you stop trying to have anything at all. It is what remains when all burdens are released, including the burden of enlightenment itself. Rest now in utter ordinariness. No need to be special, no need to have achieved anything. Just this moment, simple and complete, requiring nothing from you except your willingness to be present with it. Breathe, release, be ordinary, be free.
"So what should I do?" he asked. "Let it go," his friend said simply. "Your experience was real, your insight was genuine, but now release your grip on it. Don't make it into an identity or an achievement. Let enlightenment enlighten you so much that even the word enlightenment can be dropped. Be so free that you don't need to call yourself free." They continued walking together, two ordinary men on an ordinary path, and in their ordinariness was a peace that needed no name. This story addresses a subtle trap that spiritual seekers can fall into, making enlightenment itself into an ego achievement. The first monk had genuine insight, but he had grasped it, turned it into something he owned, something that made him special or superior. His enlightenment had become a burden rather than a liberation. There is a famous Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." The activities don't change. Life continues in its ordinary way. What changes is the freedom from needing to be special, from needing to prove anything, from carrying the burden of any identity, including the identity of being enlightened. True freedom is so complete that it includes the freedom from needing to be free. It is so ordinary that it does not set itself apart. The person who has deeply realized their true nature does not go around announcing it, does not need others to recognize it, does not make it into a special achievement. This teaching can be uncomfortable because it undermines our spiritual ambitions. We want enlightenment to make us special, to set us apart, to be something we can achieve and hold up for admiration. But that very wanting is another form of the ego's game, another way of seeking validation and importance. The second monk's question, "How heavy is it?" cuts to the heart of the matter. Anything you carry becomes a burden. Any identity you construct becomes a limitation. Any achievement you cling to becomes a weight. True enlightenment is the release of all burdens, including the burden of enlightenment itself. This doesn't mean that realization is meaningless or that awakening doesn't matter. It means that real awakening is so complete that it doesn't need to announce itself, doesn't create a new self-image, doesn't separate the awakened one from others. It is a return to simplicity, to ordinariness, to the humble acknowledgement that you are not special, and that this not specialness is itself the liberation. What are you carrying that could be set down? What spiritual achievements, what insights, what special knowledge have you turned into a burden? Can you set them all down and simply be here, ordinary, nothing special, free from the need to be anything other than you are in this moment? Enlightenment, if we must use the word, is not something you have. It is something you are when you stop trying to have anything at all. It is what remains when all burdens are released, including the burden of enlightenment itself. Rest now in utter ordinariness. No need to be special. No need to have achieved anything. Just this moment, simple and complete, requiring nothing from you except your willingness to be present with it. Breathe, release, be ordinary, be free. Part 8. Gentle Closing. Return to Stillness. The Circle Complete. We have journeyed together through many stories tonight, dear listener. Stories of empty cups and stone Buddhas, of hermits and potters, of silence and sound. Each story a mirror reflecting some aspect of truth, some facet of the diamond of wisdom that is the Dharma.
Perhaps you have been awake for all of these teachings. Perhaps you drifted into sleep long ago and are hearing these words in the borderland between waking and dreaming. Either is perfectly fine. These teachings work on many levels, sinking into consciousness whether you actively listen or simply allow them to wash over you. The teachings we have explored tonight all point to the same essential truths: that peace is our natural state when we stop disturbing it, that freedom comes from releasing rather than grasping, that what we seek is already present when we stop seeking. But now let us return to silence. Let us complete the circle by coming back to where we began, to simple presence, to the breath, to the miracle of awareness itself. Final meditation. Take a moment to notice your body. It has been resting here this whole time, carrying you faithfully through the night. Feel whatever contact your body makes with what supports it. Feel the weight of your body, fully supported, held by the earth beneath you. Notice your breath, flowing naturally, requiring no effort. The breath has been with you for every moment of your life, a loyal companion, a constant rhythm that continues whether you pay attention or not. For this moment, just notice it. The coolness as air enters, the warmth as it leaves, the gentle rise and fall of the chest or belly. Nothing to change, nothing to fix, just noticing. And notice the awareness itself, the consciousness that knows the body, that registers the breath, that has been present for every story, every teaching, every moment of this night. This awareness is your deepest nature. It is always here, always peaceful, always whole. It doesn't come and go like thoughts and sensations. It is the constant background, the screen on which everything appears. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that witnesses thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the space in which emotions arise and pass. You are not your body. You are the consciousness that experiences the body. This awareness is what you truly are, and it has never been disturbed, never been lacking, never been anything other than peaceful and free. Rest now in utter ordinariness. No need to be special, no need to have achieved anything, just this moment, simple and complete, requiring nothing from you except your willingness to be present with it. Breathe, release, be ordinary, be free.
The teaching of sleep. The Buddha taught that attachment causes suffering, and yet we practice attachment every night without realizing it. We attach to being awake. We hold on to consciousness, sometimes desperately, fighting against the natural pull towards sleep. But what if we could release even this attachment? What if we could let go into sleep with the same trust that we let go into a comfortable chair? Sleep is not an enemy. It is not a failure or a loss. It is a natural state of being, a form of healing, a return to source. Tonight, if sleep comes, welcome it. Let yourself release control and sink into that mysterious realm where consciousness transforms. Trust that you will return in the morning refreshed and renewed. Trust the process of letting go. And if sleep does not come, if you remain awake, this too is perfectly acceptable. There is no requirement that you sleep. Simply rest. Let your body be still, your breath be easy, your mind be gentle with itself. Wakefulness in the middle of the night can be its own kind of meditation, its own form of peace. Either way, sleeping or waking, you are held in the great compassion of the Dharma, in the wisdom that embraces all states, that judges none, that accepts what is with perfect grace. Loving kindness to close. As we come to the end of our time together, let us offer a moment of loving kindness, not as something forced or artificial, but as a natural expression of the heart. May you be safe. May you be protected from harm. May you rest peacefully through this night. May you be healthy. May your body find healing and balance. May you be comfortable and at ease. May you be happy. May joy find its way to your heart. May you know moments of lightness and peace. May you be free. May you release all burdens, all worries, all struggles. May you know the freedom that is your birthright. And may all beings everywhere be safe, be healthy, be happy, be free. May all beings rest in peace tonight. May all beings awaken to their true nature. The final story, Going Home. There is a story told of a seeker who traveled for many years, visiting every temple, every master, every sacred site, searching for enlightenment. Finally, exhausted and discouraged, he returned to his childhood home. As he walked up the familiar path, seeing the house where he grew up, something shifted in him. He realized that he had been traveling in circles, always looking elsewhere, always believing that truth was somewhere other than where he was. He sat down on the front step of his home, and in that moment, he understood. He had never left home. Throughout all his traveling, through all his seeking, he had carried home with him. He was home. He had always been home. He just forgot how to notice it. You too are home right now, not in some future moment of awakening, not in some distant place of peace. Right here, right now, in this body, in this breath, in this moment of awareness, you are home. You have always been home. You just forgot. Let yourself remember now. Let yourself sink into the deep recognition that there is nowhere else to go, nothing else to achieve, no one else to become. This is it. This moment, this breath, this awareness. Home. Welcome home, dear traveler. Rest now. You have arrived.
Part 9. The Nature of Reality. The Moon in the Water. A young monk was walking by a pond one evening when he saw the full moon reflected perfectly on the water's still surface. Overcome with the desire to possess such beauty, he waded into the pond and tried to grasp the moon's reflection. His hands broke the surface, and the image shattered into 1,000 ripples. Again and again he tried, each time destroying the very thing he sought to capture. Frustrated and cold, he finally gave up and stood still in the water. As he stopped moving, the ripples gradually ceased, and the moon's reflection returned, whole and perfect. An old master who had been watching from the shadows spoke. "The moon in the sky has not moved. The moon in the water appears and disappears based on conditions. When you grasp for it, it vanishes. When you are still, it reveals itself." The young monk understood. The reflection is not the moon itself. "Yes," said the master, "and yet is the reflection any less beautiful? Is it any less worthy of appreciation simply because it is not the thing itself? We spend our lives grasping at reflections, mistaking them for reality, trying to possess what cannot be held. We grasp at happiness, at love, at success, all reflections in the water of our experience, and in our grasping, we destroy them. "What should I do instead?" asked the monk. "Be still, appreciate, let things be as they are. The moon is always there, whether reflected in water or not. The happiness you seek is always available, whether circumstances reflect it or not. Stop grasping at reflections and look up at the real moon, your own true nature, which was never in the water to begin with." The young monk dried himself and sat by the pond. He looked at the moon in the water, then at the moon in the sky, then back again. Both were beautiful. Both were teaching him. And in his stillness, he understood that the problem was never with the reflections, but with his attempt to possess them. This story speaks to our relationship with all phenomena. We live in a world of reflections. Everything we experience is filtered through our senses, interpreted by our minds, colored by our conditioning. We never perceive reality directly. We only perceive our mind's reflection of reality.
And yet we grasp at these reflections as if they were solid and permanent. We try to hold on to pleasant experiences, to push away unpleasant ones, to control and possess what is by nature fleeting and ephemeral. This grasping is the source of our suffering. The teaching is not that reflections are false or worthless. The moon in the water is genuinely beautiful. Our experiences, though impermanent and conditioned, are still real experiences. The teaching is about our relationship to these experiences. When we grasp, we suffer. When we try to control, we create disturbance. But when we can appreciate without possessing, experience without clinging, we discover a different kind of relationship with life. We can enjoy the moon in the water without needing to own it. We can appreciate beauty without needing to capture it. We can love without needing to control. This teaching also points to something deeper, the distinction between reflection and source. The moon in the water depends on many conditions: a still pond, a clear night, the right angle. When conditions change, the reflection disappears, but the moon itself remains unchanged. Similarly, our experiences are conditional, dependent on countless factors. Our moods, our circumstances, our perceptions, all arise from conditions and change when conditions change. But beneath all these changing conditions is something unchanging: awareness itself, the consciousness that witnesses all reflections without being touched by them. When we stop identifying with the reflections, the changing thoughts, emotions, circumstances, and recognize ourselves as the awareness in which all reflections appear, we find a stability that is not dependent on conditions. We find the real moon, not the one in the water. As you rest here, consider, what reflections are you grasping at? What are you trying to hold on to, control, possess? Can you appreciate the beauty of your experience without needing to own it? Can you look beyond the reflections to recognize the awareness that perceives them all? Let your breath be gentle. Like the pond becoming still, let your mind settle. In the stillness, truth reflects itself clearly. The clay Buddha and the golden Buddha. In ancient times, a monastery possessed a magnificent clay Buddha statue. It was large and beautiful, beloved by all who saw it. For generations, monks cared for it, touching up the clay, maintaining its appearance. One day, the monastery needed to be moved because of approaching armies. The monks carefully transported all their possessions, including the clay Buddha. As they were moving it, one of the monks accidentally struck the statue, and a piece of clay fell off. Underneath the clay, they saw a glint of gold. Excited and curious, they carefully removed more clay. To their astonishment, beneath the plain clay exterior was a solid gold Buddha, radiant and precious beyond measure. The truth emerged. Centuries ago, when invaders threatened the land, monks had covered their golden Buddha with clay to hide its value and protect it from being stolen. Over time, the story was forgotten. Generations of monks had lived with a priceless treasure, believing it to be merely clay. The abbot, upon seeing the golden Buddha revealed, wept. Not tears of joy at the discovery, but tears of recognition. "This is the story of every person," he said. "Beneath the clay of our conditioned self, our fears and insecurities, our limiting beliefs and protective barriers, there is gold, our true nature, radiant and precious. But we have forgotten. We look at ourselves and others and see only clay." One monk asked, "Should we remove all the clay then to reveal the gold?" The abbot smiled. The clay served its purpose. It protected the gold when protection was needed. In the same way, our defensive patterns, our personality structures, our ways of coping, all were necessary at some time. We should not hate the clay, but we should remember it is not who we truly are.
When we can see past the clay to the gold beneath, in ourselves and in others, we see truly. Another monk asked, "How do we remove the clay from ourselves?" "You don't remove it through force," the abbot replied. "You remove it through understanding. Each time you recognize that you are more than your fears, more than your thoughts, more than your past, a little clay falls away. Each time you touch your true nature in meditation, a little clay crumbles. Each time you act from love rather than fear, the gold shows through." The clay Buddha sat here for generations, and it was still a Buddha, gold or clay. Your true nature is not diminished by the clay that covers it. The gold was always there, always precious, always perfect. You need not create it or earn it. You need only remember it, recognize it, allow it to be revealed. This powerful story addresses the Buddhist teaching of Buddha nature, the innate awakened quality that exists in all beings. We are not fundamentally broken or flawed. We are not sinful creatures needing redemption. We are, at our core, already whole, already enlightened, already perfect. But this truth has been covered over by layers of conditioning. From the moment we are born, we begin accumulating clay. Our family teaches us who we are. Society tells us what we should be. Our experiences, especially painful ones, cause us to develop protective layers. We create personas, masks, defensive strategies. We internalize limiting beliefs. Layer by layer, the clay builds up until we forget entirely what lies beneath. We come to believe we are the clay. We identify with our wounds, our patterns, our conditioned self. We think, "I am anxious, I am inadequate, I am unworthy." But these are just clay, accumulated protective layers that have nothing to do with our true nature. The spiritual path, in this understanding, is not about becoming something new or adding something we lack. It is about recognition, revelation, remembering. It is about seeing through the clay to the gold that was always there. This changes everything about how we approach practice. We are not trying to fix ourselves or improve ourselves or make ourselves worthy. We are simply clearing away the obscurations, the false identifications, the limiting beliefs that hide what we already are. And
The clay served a purpose. It protected the gold. In the same way, our defensive patterns, our coping mechanisms, our wounded self-protective strategies, they all served a purpose at some time. They helped us survive. We need not hate them or violently reject them. We can have compassion for the clay, even as we remember it is not our true nature. What clay are you carrying? What false beliefs about yourself have accumulated over the years? What protective layers have you built that no longer serve you? Can you sense the gold beneath, the inherent worthiness, the fundamental okayness, the Buddha nature that was never damaged or diminished no matter what happened to you? You are not broken. You are not fundamentally flawed. You are gold covered with clay. And the spiritual journey is simply the gradual revelation of what you have always been. Rest in this knowing. Beneath all the surface disturbance, beneath all the personality patterns and conditioned responses, there is something unshakable, something pure, something radiant. This is your true nature. It has never left. It is simply waiting to be remembered. Breathe gently. Let the clay of tension, of striving, of self-judgment soften and fall away. Rest as the gold you have always been. The Master's Mistake. A renowned Zen master was giving a lecture to a packed hall. Students had traveled from across the land to hear his teaching. He spoke eloquently about the nature of mind, about emptiness and form, about the path to liberation. Midway through his talk, he made a significant error, confusing two technical terms from the Buddhist tradition.
A scholar in the audience immediately stood up and corrected him, somewhat smugly, demonstrating his own knowledge. The master paused, looked at the scholar, and then bowed deeply. "You are absolutely correct. Thank you for the correction. I spoke carelessly." The audience was surprised by this humble response. After the lecture, several students approached the master privately. "Teacher, you are renowned for your wisdom. That scholar was arrogant and rude in how he corrected you. Why did you bow to him?" The master smiled. "I made a mistake. He corrected me. Why would I not bow to truth wherever it comes from? Does truth become less true because it comes from an arrogant person? Does being corrected become less valuable because the one correcting me has an inflated ego?" One student said, "But don't you worry that people will lose respect for you seeing you make an error?" The master replied, "If people respect me only because they believe I am perfect, their respect is based on delusion. I would rather be respected for my humanity than for a false perfection. Making a mistake and acknowledging it openly is far more valuable than pretending infallibility." Another student asked, "Weren't you embarrassed?" The master considered this. "There was a moment of ego defensiveness that arose. That is the conditioned response. But I have practiced long enough to recognize that response and not act from it. My ego wanted to defend, to justify, to minimize the error. But what benefit would that bring? The error was made whether I admit it or not. Defending it doesn't unmake it. It only adds another layer of delusion." The real teaching today was not in my words about emptiness. It was in that moment of being corrected. In that moment, the choice was clear: protect the ego or honor the truth. Every time we choose truth over ego protection, we weaken the ego's grip. Every time we can admit we were wrong, we strengthen genuine humility. He laughed softly. "Besides, perfect people are boring. It is in our mistakes, in our humanity, in our willingness to be vulnerable and imperfect that we connect most deeply with others. A master without flaws would be impossible to relate to. My mistake today may have taught more than my intended lecture." This story illuminates several important teachings. First, it shows true humility, not the false humility of self-deprecation, but the genuine humility that comes from not being invested in an image of perfection. The master had nothing to defend because he was not attached to being seen as flawless. Second, it demonstrates the practice of receiving correction with grace. Our ego fights fiercely against being corrected. It experiences correction as attack, as diminishment, as a threat. But correction is a gift. When someone points out our error, they give us the opportunity to see more clearly, to adjust course, to learn. If we can receive this gift without defensiveness, we grow. Third, the story teaches about the separation between truth and the messenger. The scholar was arrogant, but his correction was valid. Many people reject truth because they don't like the person delivering it. They conflate the message with the messenger. But truth remains truth regardless of who speaks it. The master could see past the scholar's ego to the valid point being made. Finally, it illustrates the value of modeling imperfection. A teacher who pretends to be perfect creates an impossible standard and a relationship based on false premises. A teacher who can make mistakes and own them openly teaches something far more valuable: that the spiritual path is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming authentic, honest, real. Finally, the story illustrates mindfulness in action. The master noticed the arising of defensiveness, but did not act from it. This is the fruit of practice, not that reactive emotions never arise, but that we develop the capacity to witness them and choose our response rather than being compelled by them.
How do you respond when corrected, when your mistakes are pointed out, when someone questions your knowledge or competence? Does defensiveness arise? Does the need to justify, explain, deflect? These are natural ego responses, but they need not control your behavior. What would change if you could receive correction as a gift,
if you could admit mistakes freely without feeling diminished, if you could let go of the need to appear infallible. There is profound freedom in accepting your humanity, in being willing to be wrong, in releasing the exhausting effort of protecting a perfect image. The Master bowed to truth. Can you? Not just when it comes from respected sources, but even when it comes from those you disagree with, those you don't like, those who may deliver it ungracefully. Truth is truth, worthy of recognition and respect regardless of the package it arrives in. Rest in your humanity. You will make mistakes. This is guaranteed. The question is not whether you will err, but how you will respond when you do. Can you do so with grace, with humor, with the recognition that imperfection is not a bug, but a feature of being human? Let go of the burden of perfection. Breathe into the relief of being allowed to be human, flawed, and still worthy of respect and love. Part 10. The Practice of Acceptance. The Farmer's Fortune. There was a farmer who lived a simple life with his son. They had one horse, which they used for plowing and transportation. One day, the horse ran away. The neighbors came and said, "Oh, what bad luck, you've lost your only horse. How terrible for you." The farmer simply replied, "Maybe, maybe not. We'll see." A week later, the horse returned, bringing with it 3 wild horses. The neighbors came again and said, "Oh, what good fortune. Now you have 4 horses. How wonderful for you." The farmer replied, "Maybe, maybe not. We'll see." The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses. He was thrown off and broke his leg badly. The neighbors came and said, "Oh, what misfortune! Your only son is injured and cannot help with the work. How terrible!" The farmer replied, "Maybe, maybe not. We'll see." A week later, military officers came to the village, conscripting all able-bodied young men for a war. Because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was left behind. The neighbors came and said, "Oh, what good fortune! Your son was spared from going to war." The farmer replied, "Maybe, maybe not. We'll see." Years later, a student who had heard this story asked the farmer, who was now an old man, "Master, the story is famous, but tell me, didn't you feel anything when these events happened? Weren't you worried when your horse ran away? Weren't you happy when it returned with 3 more? Didn't you feel grief when your son was injured?" The old farmer smiled. "Of course I felt things. I am human, not a stone. When the horse ran away, there was disappointment. When my son broke his leg, there was concern and sadness. These feelings arose naturally." "Then what did you mean by maybe, maybe not, we'll see?" the student asked. "I meant that I did not know the full story," the farmer explained. "My neighbors rushed to judgment, deciding that each event was either good fortune or bad fortune, but I knew that I could not see the whole picture. What appears to be bad luck may lead to good outcomes. What appears to be good fortune may bring challenges. Life is too complex, too interconnected for me to judge any single event as simply good or bad." "But more than that," he continued, "I learned not to add suffering to difficulty. When the horse ran away, there was the fact of the missing horse. That was reality. But my neighbors wanted to add to it a story about how terrible this was, how unfortunate, how it would lead to ruin. That story would have created additional suffering beyond the simple fact of a missing horse. When my son was injured, there was the pain of his injury and my concern for his well-being. That was enough. Why should I add to it catastrophic stories about what this means, how our lives are ruined, how terrible our fate is? Those stories don't help. They only multiply suffering." The student understood. So maybe, maybe not means staying with what is without adding judgment or story. "Yes," the farmer said. "It means staying present with reality as it unfolds, moment by moment, without rushing to conclusions about what it all means. It means accepting what is while remaining open to what comes next. It means not pretending to know the future, not assuming that good or bad states will last forever. It means," he concluded, "living with uncertainty and being at peace with not knowing how the story will end."
This beloved teaching story addresses one of the deepest practices in Buddhism, acceptance of what is, coupled with non-judgment about what it means. The farmer had cultivated what might be called wise uncertainty, the recognition that we cannot know the full implications of any event, and therefore our judgments about good and bad fortune are premature at best. This doesn't mean we become passive or indifferent. The farmer still worked his farm, still cared for his son, still responded appropriately to circumstances. But he didn't add layers of mental suffering through premature judgment and catastrophizing thinking. Most of our suffering is not about what is actually happening, but about our thoughts about what is happening. An event occurs, neutral in itself, and we immediately layer onto it interpretations, meanings, predictions. We tell ourselves stories about what this means about our life, our worth, our future. These stories often cause more pain than the event itself. The farmer's maybe, maybe not, will see is a practice of holding judgments lightly. It's an acknowledgement of the vast complexity of causation, the interconnectedness of all things, the impossibility of seeing the full picture from our limited vantage point. This practice requires a deep trust in the process of life, not a blind faith that everything happens for a reason or that all will be well, but a mature acceptance that we cannot control outcomes, cannot predict the future, cannot know how current events will ripple through time. It also requires distinguishing between the two arrows of suffering. The Buddha talked about this. The first arrow is the actual painful event, the broken leg, the lost horse, the disappointment. This we cannot always avoid. But the second arrow is our reaction to the event, the story we tell about it, the meaning we assign, the catastrophizing and rumination. This second arrow we can learn to avoid. When difficulty comes, can you meet it with maybe, maybe not, we'll see? Can you stay with the actual reality of the situation without adding layers of judgment and story? Can you remain open to the possibility that what appears negative may lead to expected positive outcomes, and vice versa? This practice leads to a profound equanimity, not the coldness of indifference, but the warmth of acceptance. It allows us to ride the waves of life without being capsized by them. It helps us meet both fortune and misfortune with steadiness, knowing that both are temporary and both are part of a larger pattern we cannot fully see. As you rest here, what judgments are you carrying about your life? What events have you labeled definitively as good fortune or bad fortune? Can you hold these labels more lightly? Can you return to "we'll see," an opening to possibility, an acceptance of uncertainty, a willingness to let life unfold without demanding to know how the story ends? Breathe into this space of not knowing. Rest in the humble recognition that you cannot see the whole picture. Trust the process, even when you don't understand it. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see.
The broken bowl. A monk had a favorite tea bowl. It was simple but perfectly proportioned, with a glaze that seemed to hold light. He had received it as a gift from his first teacher, and it carried deep sentimental value. He handled it with great care, treasuring it as one of his few possessions. One day, while washing the bowl, it slipped from his hands and shattered on the stone floor. The monk stood staring at the pieces, and a wave of grief washed over him, not just for the lost bowl, but for all it represented, his connection to his teacher, the memories associated with it, the beauty that was now destroyed. He gathered the pieces carefully and brought them to his current teacher, tears in his eyes. "Master, I have broken my bowl, the one my first teacher gave me. I feel such loss." The teacher looked at the fragments and then at his student. "You are not crying for the bowl." "What do you mean?" the monk asked. "The bowl broke just now, but your grief began long ago, the moment you attached to it, the moment you told yourself it must never be broken, the moment you made your peace dependent on its continued existence. The breaking of the bowl simply revealed the attachment you had been carrying all along." The teacher continued gently.
Your first teacher gave you the bowl to use, not to worship, to appreciate, not to cling to. The bowl served you well for years. Now it has taught you its final lesson about the nature of impermanence and the suffering that comes from attachment. Should I not care about anything then? The monk asked, still holding the pieces. Care deeply, the teacher said. Love deeply. Appreciate fully. The practice is in holding lightly what you care about, recognizing its preciousness while also recognizing its impermanence. When it breaks, and everything breaks eventually, you can feel sadness without adding the weight of attachment to it. The teacher picked up one of the larger pieces. In Japan, there is an art called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, making the breaks part of the bowl's beauty rather than something to hide. Perhaps you can do this with your bowl, or perhaps the bowl has completed its purpose and should return to the earth. Either way, the bowl is not gone. It has simply changed form. But my connection to my teacher, the monk began, is not in the bowl, the teacher finished. Your teacher gave you teachings, wisdom, example. These live in you, not in a piece of pottery. The bowl was a symbol, a reminder, but the reality it pointed to, your teacher's care, your gratitude, the transmission of the Dharma, these cannot be broken by the falling of a teacup. The monk sat with this teaching. Slowly, his grip on the broken pieces loosened. He saw how he had been confusing the symbol with what it symbolized, had been investing objects with meaning, and then believed the meaning was lost when the object was lost. But meanings, memories, connections, these are not dependent on physical objects. They live in us. The bowl was a reminder, but what it reminded him of, his teacher's wisdom and care, these remain whether the bowl exists or not. The transformation of the broken pieces into something useful in the garden is a beautiful metaphor for how we can work with loss. We cannot always prevent things from breaking, but we can choose what we do with the pieces. We can let them become compost for new growth. We can find new ways for them to serve. We can integrate the loss into the larger picture of our lives, letting it teach us and reshape us. What are you attached to? What are you holding so tightly that you live in fear of its loss? Can you practice holding it more lightly, appreciating it fully while also recognizing its impermanence? And what have you lost that you are still grieving? Can you see how some of your grief is not just for the lost thing itself, but for the attachment you built around it? Can you honor the sadness while also beginning to release the story that your well-being depended on that thing never changing? The bowl taught more broken than it did whole. Sometimes our losses teach us more than our possessions. Sometimes what shatters opens us to understanding we couldn't reach while trying to keep everything intact.
Rest in this teaching. Breathe into the spaces of loss and letting go. Trust that what is truly valuable cannot be broken, cannot be lost, because it lives not in things, but in the heart of awareness itself. Everything breaks eventually. This is not a tragedy, but simply the nature of form. And beneath all forms that break and pass away is something that never breaks, never passes, the awareness that witnesses it all, untouched and free. Let yourself rest in that unbreakable awareness now. Hold everything lightly, love everything deeply. Let it all come and go in its own time. Part 11. Wisdom Stories. The Scholar and the Ferryman. A wealthy scholar hired a ferryman to take him across a wide river. As the ferryman rowed, the scholar, seeing the simple man's rough hands and weathered face, decided to engage in conversation to pass the time. "Tell me, ferryman, have you studied mathematics?"
"No, sir," replied the ferryman, keeping his eyes on the river. "I know only how to count coins and measure distance by the stars." The scholar shook his head. "What a pity! You have wasted a quarter of your life." They traveled further in silence until the scholar spoke again. "Have you studied literature? Do you read the great poets and philosophers?" "No, sir," the ferryman said. "I never learned to read beyond what was necessary for my work." "How unfortunate!" exclaimed the scholar. "You have wasted half your life." The scholar sat back, satisfied with his own education, while the ferryman continued to row steadily. Suddenly, the boat struck something beneath the water and began taking on water rapidly. The ferryman quickly assessed the situation. "Sir, can you swim?" he asked urgently. "No," the scholar replied, panic rising in his voice. "I spent my time in books, not in physical pursuits. Why do you ask?" The ferryman was already preparing to abandon the sinking boat. "Because, sir, you are about to waste your entire life." With that, the ferryman dove into the water and swam strongly toward the shore. The scholar, unable to swim, had to be rescued by the ferryman, who returned for him and pulled him to safety. As they stood on the riverbank, wet and exhausted, the scholar was humbled. "You saved my life. I mocked your lack of education, but my learning was useless when it mattered most." The ferryman wrung out his shirt. "Every kind of knowledge has its place and its time. Your learning serves you in your world. My skills serve me in mine. Who is to say which is more valuable? Both have worth, but it is foolish to judge another's life by the measure of your own." The scholar bowed deeply. "You have taught me something no book ever could." "And you," the ferryman replied with a smile, "have reminded me why I am content with my simple life. I have what I need for the life I lead. That is its own kind of wealth." This story challenges our assumptions about the value of knowledge and success. The scholar had been taught that education and intellectual achievement were the highest goods, and he judged the ferryman's life as wasted based on that measure. But when the situation changed, when different skills were required, the scholar's knowledge became irrelevant and the ferryman's practical wisdom became essential. We all tend to measure others by our own values, our own definitions of success and worthiness. Those who are good at what we value, we admire. Those who excel at things we don't value, we dismiss or pity. But this reveals more about our limited perspective than about the actual worth of different ways of living. The ferryman's life was not wasted. He had deep knowledge of his craft, reading the river, understanding weather, navigating currents, mastering the physical strength and endurance his work required. This knowledge kept him and countless passengers safe. It allowed him to earn his living, to serve his community, to find satisfaction in work well done. By what right did the scholar judge this life as lesser? Moreover, the ferryman possessed something the scholar lacked: contentment. He didn't compare himself to others or feel he should be living a different life. He had what he needed for the life he led. This self-acceptance, this freedom from constant comparison and striving, is itself a form of wisdom often more valuable than any book learning. The story also teaches about the conditional nature of all knowledge and skills. What is valuable in one context may be useless in another. The scholar's learning, so impressive in the salon and the university, could not save him from drowning. The ferryman's skills, so easily dismissed in the world of intellectuals, were literally life-saving in his element. This is true not just of practical versus intellectual knowledge, but of all the different ways people find meaning and value in life. The artist's sensibility, the athlete's discipline, the parent's patience, the tradesperson's skill, the contemplative's insight. Each has value in its own context, and none should be judged as superior or inferior to others. The deeper teaching is about releasing judgment altogether. Why do we need to rank different forms of life, different paths, different values? Why not simply appreciate the diversity, recognizing that each person must find their own way, must develop the skills and knowledge appropriate to their life and their calling? The scholar's education was not worthless. He simply needed to stop using it as a weapon of judgment. The ferryman's simple life was not wasted. He simply needed to be respected for what it was, rather than criticized for what it wasn't. Where in your life are you judging others by your own measures? Where are you assuming that your way is the right way, your values the true values, your definition of success the true one? Can you expand your appreciation to include ways of being that are different from your own? And where are you judging yourself, finding yourself lacking because you don't measure up to someone else's definition of a worthy life? Can you recognize that you have what you need for the life you lead, that your path has its own validity, that your worth is not determined by how you compare to others? The ferryman was content. The scholar, for all his education, was not, until he learned humility and appreciation from a man he had dismissed. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes the simplest life contains the deepest peace. Rest in this understanding. You need not prove your worth by any external measure. You need not judge yourself or others by arbitrary standards. Each life has its own validity, its own value, its own form of beauty. Breathe. Release judgment. Rest in simple acceptance of what is. The sound of silence. A renowned musician lost his hearing in old age. For a man whose entire life had been dedicated to sound, to music, to the subtle variations of tone and rhythm, this loss was devastating. He fell into deep despair, feeling his life had lost all meaning. Unable to perform or teach, he withdrew from the world, spending his days in bitter solitude. His students and friends tried to reach him, but he turned them all away. "How can I be a musician without hearing?" he would ask. "I am nothing now." One day, a young monk came to visit. Unlike others who had tried to cheer the old musician or distract him from his loss, the monk simply sat with him in silence. Day after day, the monk would come and sit, saying nothing, doing nothing, just being present with the old man in his grief. Finally, after many days of this, the musician's curiosity overcame his bitterness. "Why do you come here? Why waste your time sitting with a broken old man?" The monk smiled. "I come to listen to the silence with you." "The silence?" The musician was confused. "There is nothing to listen to. That's my torment. I hear nothing." "Close your eyes," the monk suggested gently. "Feel what you feel. Be present with what is here, right now."
The musician, having nothing better to do, complied. He sat with his eyes closed. At first, there was only frustration, only the absence of what he had lost. But the monk's steady presence encouraged him to stay with the experience. Minutes passed. Then something began to shift. He became aware of his breathing, the gentle rise and fall of his chest. He felt the air moving in and out of his body. He noticed the sensation of sitting, the contact between his body and the chair. He felt the warmth of sunlight coming through the window. All of these sensations had been there before, but he had never really attended to them. Sound had been everything to him, and now, stripped of sound, he was discovering a whole world of experience he had overlooked. "I feel," he said slowly, opening his eyes. "I feel many things." "Yes," the monk said, "the silence is not empty.
It is full of presence, of sensation, of life. You have been hearing silence as absence, the absence of sound, but it is also a presence, the presence of stillness, of awareness, of being. Over the following weeks, the monk taught the old musician to meditate, to be present with his experience without judgment, without the constant comparison to what was lost. And something unexpected began to happen. The musician started to remember music differently. Before, he had always experienced music through his ears, through sound. Now, when he remembered a piece of music, he experienced it differently. He felt it in his body, saw it as patterns and colors in his mind, sensed it as pure vibration and emotion. The music was still there, but his relationship to it had transformed. He began to write again, composing in his mind, feeling the rhythms and harmonies in ways he never had before. His new compositions, written in silence, had a depth and emotional resonance that many considered even more profound than his earlier work. When students came to visit, he would tell them, "I thought losing my hearing meant losing everything, but it turns out I was identified with only one way of experiencing life. Losing that forced me to discover other ways, not inferior ways, but different ways. The silence has taught me what the sound never could." He lived many more productive years, and when he finally died, it was said that he died peacefully, listening to a symphony only he could hear. This powerful story teaches about adaptation, resilience, and the nature of identity. The musician had built his entire identity around one faculty, one way of experiencing the world. When that was taken from him, he believed he had lost everything. He could not imagine being a musician without hearing, could not conceive of a life that still held meaning. But the monk helped him discover something crucial. We are more than any single faculty or ability. When one door closes, others remain open. We simply have to learn to perceive them. The musician discovered that sound was not the only way to experience music, that his ears were not the only organs of musical perception. This story also teaches about the difference between loss and emptiness. The musician initially experienced his silence as pure absence, as a void where something precious used to be. But the monk helped him see that silence itself is not empty. It is full of other forms of presence, other ways of being. We often define ourselves by what we can do, by our abilities and achievements. But what happens when those are taken from us? Age, illness, accident, any of these can strip away the things we thought defined us. Do we become nothing? Or do we discover that we were always more than those things? The teaching suggests that every loss contains within it the seed of new discovery, not because loss is good, but because it forces us to find new ways of being. When our familiar patterns are disrupted, when what we relied upon is taken away, we are challenged to discover resources we didn't know we had. The musician's new compositions, written in silence, were said to be even more profound than his earlier work. Sometimes limitation becomes the ground for a deeper creativity. Sometimes what we thought we couldn't live without was actually constraining us in ways we couldn't see. This doesn't mean we should welcome loss or pretend it isn't painful. The musician's grief was real and necessary, but the story suggests that grief need not be the final word. There is a movement through grief toward discovery, toward new forms of life, toward meanings we couldn't have imagined while we still possessed what we have lost. What have you lost that you believed defined you? What abilities, what relationships, what circumstances did you think were essential to your identity? Can you begin to sense that you are more than what you have lost? That other doors remain open? That life continues to offer possibilities even after significant loss? And what might you discover if you stopped identifying so completely with your current abilities and circumstances?
What other forms of experience, what other ways of being might be available if you were more open to them? The silence is not empty. Your life is not empty even when it feels like something essential has been taken from you. There is always more to discover, more to experience, more ways of being alive and present and engaged with reality. Rest in this possibility. Breathe into the fullness that exists even in apparent emptiness. Trust that you are more than you know, that life contains more than you have yet discovered. The silence sings. Can you hear it?
Part 12. Final Contemplations. The Mountain and the Cloud. A cloud drifted by a mountain peak and called out mockingly, "You have stood in the same place for thousands of years. How boring your existence must be. I, on the other hand, have seen the world. I have traveled over oceans and deserts, valleys and cities. I am free, while you are trapped." The mountain was silent for a long moment, then spoke. "It is true that I do not move from this place, but I have watched 10,000 clouds like you pass by. Clouds that thought they were free because they moved. Clouds that believed their restless wandering was superior to my stillness. Each cloud appears different, but each is essentially the same, formed from the same water vapor, following the same patterns of wind and weather, eventually dissolving and reforming in an endless cycle. You think you are free, but you are blown by every wind, shaped by every temperature change, controlled by forces you don't understand. You call this freedom?" The cloud paused, less certain now. The mountain continued. "I have stood here long enough to see that there are two kinds of movement. There is the movement of the cloud, restless, driven by external forces, never at rest. And there is the movement of the mountain. I appear still, but I am constantly changing. Snow melts and becomes rivers that carve my face. Rocks fall and reshape my slopes. Plants grow and die on my flanks. I am alive with change, yet I remain rooted, stable, here. You ask which is better, your movement or my stillness, but this is a false question. The mountain needs the cloud needs the mountain. We are not separate, not in competition. We are part of the same system, the same dance. Your rain feeds my forests. My peaks create the conditions for your formation. True freedom, the mountain concluded, is not in choosing between movement and stillness, but in understanding that both have their place. The wise person knows when to move and when to be still, when to act and when to simply be. They are not controlled by external circumstances, but respond appropriately to each moment. The cloud drifted on, but something in the mountain's words stayed with it, and when it eventually dissolved and reformed, it approached mountains with more respect, recognizing in their ancient stillness a wisdom its constant motion had missed. This story beautifully illustrates the Buddhist middle way, the path that avoids extremes. We often think in binary terms, movement versus stillness, action versus inaction, engagement versus withdrawal. But wisdom lies in transcending these false dichotomies. The cloud represents one extreme, constant restlessness, the belief that freedom means never staying still, never committing, always moving on to the next thing. This kind of movement is not really freedom. The cloud is blown by forces beyond its control. It doesn't choose its direction. It is pushed by wind and temperature. Many people who appear to be living freely are actually driven by internal compulsions, by the inability to be still with themselves, by the fear of facing what arises in stillness. The mountain represents another wisdom, the power of presence, of rootedness, of being fully in one place. But the mountain's stillness is not stagnation. It is alive with change, with growth, with constant transformation. It demonstrates that you can be still and yet not stuck, rooted and yet not rigid.
The mountain also possesses a long view. Because it has remained in one place, it has witnessed countless cycles. It understands patterns the cloud cannot see. There is a wisdom that comes only from staying put, from going deep rather than wide, from being present through many changes rather than constantly moving on. The teaching is that we need both. There is a time for the cloud's movement and a time for the mountain's stillness. There is a place for exploration and a place for depth. The wise person is not rigidly attached to either, but can flow between them appropriately. Moreover, the mountain points out that cloud and mountain are not separate, not in competition. They need each other. They are part of a larger whole. In the same way, the active and contemplative aspects of life are not opposed, but complementary. We need times of doing and times of being, times of engagement and times of withdrawal. Modern culture tends to glorify constant movement, constant productivity, constant experience gathering. We are like clouds, proud of our motion, mocking those who choose depth over breadth, presence over productivity. But this one-sided view creates exhaustion, superficiality, the inability to truly rest. The practice is to develop both capacities, to be like the cloud when appropriate, freely moving, exploring, engaging with the world, and to be like the mountain when appropriate, deeply rooted, stable, present with what is, and to know with discernment which is called for in each moment. Where in your life are you like the restless cloud, unable to be still, driven by forces you don't recognize? And where are you like the mountain, perhaps stuck in patterns of stillness that have become rigidity rather than presence?
Can you develop the wisdom to know when to move and when to be still? Can you recognize that both have value, that both are necessary, that neither is superior to the other? As you rest here now, practice being the mountain. Let yourself be still, rooted, present. Let change happen within the stillness, the breath moving, sensations arising and passing, thoughts drifting through. Be still and yet alive, rooted and yet dynamic. There will be time tomorrow to be the cloud, to move and act and engage. But now, be the mountain, deep, stable, witnessing all with the long view of ages. Rest. Be rooted. Be present. Be still and know. Closing words, the return to simplicity. We have traveled far tonight through stories and teachings, through wisdom passed down across centuries. We have met monks and merchants, farmers and musicians, mountains and clouds. Each story has been a doorway, an invitation to see differently, to understand more deeply. But now, let us return to where we began, to simplicity, to presence, to this breath, this moment, this awareness. All the teachings we have explored can be summarized simply: be present, accept what is, hold things lightly, act with compassion, rest in your true nature. You need not remember every story, every lesson, every teaching. Let them settle into your being like seeds planted in soil. They will grow in their own time, in their own way. Trust the process. What matters now is not understanding, not analyzing, even not remembering. What matters is being here, fully, simply, without agenda. Feel your body resting. Feel the gentle flow of breath. Notice the awareness that witnesses all of this. This simple presence is the heart of all the teachings. Everything else is elaboration. You are already home. You have always been home. The journey through these stories has been a journey to nowhere, a remembering of what you already are. Rest now in this simple knowing. Let everything be as it is. Let yourself be as you are. Nothing to fix, nothing to change, nothing to become. The night holds you gently. The darkness is not empty, but full of peace, full of rest, full of the silent presence that pervades all things. Breathe softly. Let go completely. Trust the ground beneath you, the air around you, the awareness within you. All is well. All has always been well. Rest in this eternal truth. May you sleep deeply. May you wake refreshed. May you carry forward the peace you have touched tonight. And may all beings everywhere know this same peace, this same rest, this same coming home to their true nature. Good night, dear friend. Rest well. All is well.
Thank you for sharing this time with me tonight. Thank you for listening to these ancient stories, these timeless teachings. May they have served you in whatever way you needed. As you rest now, or as you drift into sleep, know that you carry with you the wisdom of all who have walked this path before. You are part of an unbroken lineage of seekers and finders, of those who have looked deeply into the nature of existence and found peace. The teachings will continue to work on you, whether you are consciously aware of it or not. Seeds have been planted. Some will sprout immediately, others will wait for the right conditions. Trust the process. May you sleep peacefully. May you wake refreshed. May you carry forward the insights of this night into tomorrow and all your tomorrows. And may you remember always that peace is not something to achieve, but something to notice. Not somewhere else, but right here. Not in the future, but in this very moment. Rest well. The moon continues to shine whether you see it or not. Your true nature remains peaceful and free whether you notice it or not. All is well. All has always been well. Good night, dear friend. May your dreams be gentle, and may you wake with a heart full of peace. Breathe softly. Let go. Rest deeply. All is well. For those still awake, if you are still awake, still listening, this is also perfectly fine. There is no failure here. Perhaps your body needs less sleep tonight, or perhaps your mind needs more time to unwind. You can simply rest here in the silence. There is no more you need to hear, no more you need to do. Just be here, breathing gently, letting your body rest even if sleep doesn't come. Sometimes the most profound peace comes in these quiet hours of wakefulness, when the world is still and there is nothing demanding your attention. This too is a kind of meditation, a kind of practice. If you wish, you can begin these teachings again, letting them cycle through once more. Or you can simply lie here in the stillness, content to be awake, at peace with whatever this moment contains. Remember, you are not doing anything wrong. You are not failing at resting. You are simply here, and here is the only place you ever need to be. Breathe, rest, be. All is well. May all beings be at peace. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings know their true nature. May all beings rest in the heart of wisdom. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.